Welcome, everyone. My name is Christine Cubes. I'm the founder of Cubes Law Office, PLLC, serving design and construction professionals in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm honored to be the immediate past chair of the American Bar Association Forum on Construction Law. On behalf of the Forum, I welcome you to another installment of the Forum's monthly Diversity and Inclusion Brunch series. This month, featuring our special guest, the Honorable Victoria Kolakowski, Judge of Alameda County Superior Court in California, and the first openly transgender judge in California. The ABA Forum on Construction Law is the largest organization of construction lawyers in the world and serves as a thought leader and resource to the construction industry. Diversity and inclusion is a priority of the Forum as we consistently take action to enhance participation, inclusion, and leadership opportunities for attorneys of diverse backgrounds in Forum programs, publications, and other initiatives. The Forum offers several scholarships, fellowships, and leadership development programs to enhance diversity amongst construction lawyers. If you are not yet a Forum member or affiliate, I invite you to join us, join the Forum, and participate more fully in our ongoing programs to support the construction industry. You can visit www.americanbar.org and then go to the Construction Law tab. On a broader scale, the Forum is committed to raising awareness and understanding of the vital role that diversity plays in the construction industry. For many years, the Forum has featured a broad spectrum of prominent keynote diversity speakers at each of our national meetings, ranging from civil rights lawyer Fred Gray to the Right Honorable Beverly McLaughlin, the first woman to serve as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada. We got to meet her 2 years ago. That was amazing. Vicky O'Leary, who was the ENR Champion of Change last year, Award of Excellence winner. She's an iron worker who was awarded for her efforts to combat harassment on construction project sites. She was an amazing woman, spoke to us a year ago in January. Recently, the Forum held our first ever national meeting that was completely dedicated to inclusion, diversity, and professionalism within the construction industry. And that was an amazing program, fall of 2019. At the core of the Forum are the principles of respect, professionalism, inclusion, and collegiality. In addition to race, gender, ethnicity, and other categories traditionally associated with diversity and inclusion, we also value the diversity of ideas, of perspectives, and of opinions. We have created a respectful environment for that. Accordingly, through the Diversity Inclusion Brunch series, we feature a 1-hour conversation with keynote speakers who provide us with insight into issues on diversity, inclusion, construction, and the legal industry from their own personal experience. The brunches are held monthly at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, usually on the third Thursday. This week, we had to be on the Friday, but generally it's on the third Thursday of each month. So please mark that on your calendar. The programs are free and open to all members of the Forum, our friends, our colleagues, our clients, anyone who is interested in this topic and in creating inclusive environments in construction, in the law, in design, in our world. It happens one relationship at a time. Pre-registration is required, so mark your calendars and stay tuned for announcements for our ongoing programming. I would like to thank Nick Holmes, the chair of the Forum's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, for his support in developing this series. We thank Tamara Harrington, LaShonda Williams, Colleen Hardison, and all of our Forum staff who are invaluable, and their work makes this program a reality. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce the person principally responsible for today's program. That is our moderator, Jessica Bogo, who is counsel at Pillsbury Law in San Francisco, California. Jessica, I take it to you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yes, and I am very pleased to introduce the Honorable Victoria Kolakowski, who is a dear friend of mine. We had the opportunity to meet each other a number of years ago as mutual members of an organization called Bay Area Lawyers for Individual Freedom, or shorter version is known as BAILIF, the oldest and largest LGBT organization for lawyers in the country. I was immediately struck by Judge Kolakowski's humility and willing to be real. Even in my first meeting with her, I was a junior lawyer at the time and starstruck, and she was so encouraging to me and kind. We are in the presence of greatness right now, as I'm sure you will soon see if you don't already know. Judge Kolakowski is a trailblazer. She was the first openly transgender person elected to a trial court judge position. She was the first elected in California of any court. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute about why we word it that way. Judge Kolakowski spent 21 years in practice as an attorney before becoming a judge. She was in Louisiana and in California, deciding to go into law, even though she has two master's degrees in engineering, which I imagine will be of interest to our membership in particular. In the course of her career, she served in private practice as well in public service, including as an administrative law judge for two different California agencies, including the California Public Utilities Commission. She just celebrated her 10-year anniversary with the Alameda Superior Court. And as a result of that, led to some reflections as to mentoring and sponsorship that we'll talk about later as well. So today we'll talk a bit about Judge Kolakowski's journey in being an openly transgender person, navigating a career in the law, as well as ways that we can better serve as allies for folks who identify as non-binary, transgender, gender variant, gender nonconforming, and various other terms that are applicable to this space. And we'll acknowledge that this is one perspective, and that while Judge Kolakowski is, of course, familiar with various perspectives within the community relating to these issues, that we cannot speak for everyone. And so we will provide viewpoints, appreciating that the more folks we can hear from in this space, then the better idea we'll have about the various perspectives in that regard. As in a starter, I would like to go over just some nomenclature, appreciating that for our members, this may be one of the first conversations that you've been a part of talking about these issues, so that if we use some of this terminology down the line, you'll appreciate a little bit what we're talking about. So Judge Kolakowski, I'll turn it over to you. And we could talk about some of that terminology.
Well, first of all, I want to say first of all, actually, I'm the first openly transgender person elected to office in California, period. Anyway, but when we talk about, we talk about a number of things that will come up with some of the terminology that was just thrown around. And I want to explain, first of all, that terminology changes, and not everybody agrees upon these things. And one of the things that happens if you were to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community is that you will discover that we spend a lot of time arguing over terminology ourselves and how things are structured, and especially in the transgender community. Well, back when I started out, we didn't have the word transgender. Transgender was a term actually that came. But first of all, let me back up and say one thing that that we need to be clear about is the fact that there's a difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is a term that we use to describe who we love, and gender identity is who we think we are, and those are not necessarily connected. For example, I identify as a woman, and I am married to a woman who's in the next room. I have the door closed because she's working. And so she identifies as lesbian. I actually identify as bi, or pan, but because in theory, if I mean, I could have married a guy at some point, but it didn't happen. But so sexual orientation is one thing. I, however, was assigned male at birth. That's a term that you'll hear. Because when I was growing up, that's what I looked like. And so I came out later in life. So you'll hear terms like assigned male or assigned female at birth. That usually is to make it clear to people where other people started off from. Because when you use trans man and trans women, people are like, they're either going to or from, or what does that mean? And so it tries to make it clearer. So who we are on the inside is our gender identity. Who we love, which is an external thing, is our sexual orientation. We're not going to talk a lot about sexual orientation today. Today, we're here to talk about gender identity. And as I pointed out, transgender is a term that's that came about since I actually been an attorney. There are different ways in which people identify. Some people identify as being completely male or completely female, and that's what their bodies are. We call that cisgender. That's not meant as an insult. It's just the opposite of transgender. Transgender being a person who, in some ways, is identity, sense of who they are in terms of their gender is different than what they were assigned at birth. Now, some people are when we say gender non-conforming, it means that people don't meet up to society's expectations. But that's true of a lot of people. I mean, it depends on how far you want to carry it. The way that gender is expressed by people is, how we dress, how we act in public. And that ranges for people. We have really girly girls and we have tomboys. We have guys who are big and macho, and we have guys who are not like that at all. And so there are different ways that we can express what it means to us who we are as our identities. Now, if that if that's not consistent with how people expect us to be, we can say that's non-conforming or variant. Now, there are some people who don't want to buy into this whole gender binary thing at all, who just say, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I don't want to identify as either, and they identify as non-binary. That's what that means. They say, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm somewhere in between, and you can't shove me in a box. And so they often will use pronouns like they and them or other terms that may be uncomfortable or different to you. I just want to throw out the term intersex, are people who are, intersex is the proper term for what people used to call hermaphrodites, people who are born with mixed male and female physical attributes. And that's a whole separate thing. And it's a whole separate issue, and they face their own interesting challenges, but I'm not going to be going into that at all because I'm not really very expert on that. And so that's what I wanted to say about these issues. Let's move on to the next. Did that cover everything, Jessica? Do you think that we can get started?
I think that's right. And so, for example, when we talk about cisgender, I'm a cisgender woman. That's how I identify. And when we talk about these terms, it's very helpful to allow the person whose identity this applies to be the one to lead the discussions. This is not something that you'd ordinarily want to necessarily overtly ask someone. Allowing them to offer it, I think is best. And we'll talk about some tools and tips down the line, but just flag that as a clarification as well. It's great to allow folks to allow you into their world by letting you know that information. And so with that primer, and we may identify other terms or concepts that would be useful for us to discuss down the line, I'd love to talk with you, Judge Kolakowski, about your path. And so you have a hard science background. You could have avoided law. You are plenty smart in all the ways, and you still elected to go into law. And so I would love to hear your choices and provide us some background on your science background, and then how that informed your decision as to whether or not to then pursue a career in law. And then I'd love to get into your experiences as an openly transgender person navigating a career in the law.
Okay, I want to just also say for everybody's benefit, we've got now another 45 minutes or so in order to cover about 3 years worth of material. And so we're going to come through things really, really quickly. I apologize for that. This is, we're trying to cover a lot of bases. But with that being said, just to be clear about where I was coming from, from the time I was a little kid, I always, back when I was growing up, back in the dark ages, we didn't have an internet. There was no information about trans people, and so I didn't even know. I didn't have even words to describe how I felt from the time that I was very, very small, when I would have said that I felt like I want to be a girl, or I should be a girl. And that's something that I felt my entire life. And it's something I struggled with because trying to figure out, because I didn't know that there wasn't any option to do anything other than be the boy that I supposedly was. And when I was growing up, actually, to be quite honest with you, I was ashamed that I was going through, that I had this struggle, and I didn't want people to know, so I hid it. A lot of people actually, especially people of my generation, did a really good job of trying to hide it, and some of them even overcompensated. You'd be amazed at how many trans women like myself turned out to be things like stunt drivers and, fighter pilots and, race car drivers and other macho things, because they were trying to overcompensate, hoping that maybe that they would demonstrate that they somehow, or even fix themselves and become, be the person that, their body said they were supposed to be. When I was growing up, I was really, I was a nerd. And so, and when I went off to college, I started off, I have this ongoing love-hate relationship with the field of physics, which I can never be too far from, even though I've never quite mastered it. I have a right over next to me here, a whole shelf of physics books, two actually. And I started out as an undergraduate as a physics major, math major, economics, but I always thought I might want to be a lawyer, because it was my understanding that being a lawyer was a way that I could help people. And I am a bit of an extrovert, and so I thought that might be good. And so I went on. I was simultaneously struggling with who I would be professionally, as well as who I was going to be in terms of being me. And this went on through my graduate school years, which is one of the reasons why I have so many graduate degrees, is as I was struggling with trying to develop who I was going to be in the world. And yeah, I have a master's in electrical engineering and biomedical engineering, and master's in public administration and a law degree. Oh, and a master's in divinity too, but that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in school, but I, all the time, all through this period, struggling with and trying to figure out who I was. And I got the electrical engineering degree later, actually, but I first got my bachelor's degree in natural sciences, went on to get a master's in biomedical engineering, because I thought that I'd be able to, I wanted to make the lame walk and the blind see. I thought that we could, I could do things with technology that would help people, and that would really turn out not to be my thing. And so I went back to physics. And then I went into public administration and law. And when I was in my last semester in law school, I was married to somebody, talking about non-binary. My ex-spouse now identifies as non-binary. At the time, they identified as a woman. And so I was presenting as a man. They were presenting as a woman. We were married. We were in law school. They were a year behind me. They came out as a lesbian. This confused everybody because, well, they were married to me. They explained to other people that I was a lesbian too. This very much confused everybody. And I struggled with this whole thing. And so I decided I was gonna be myself. I was living a dual life at that point of being myself at home and in the world presenting as a guy. And I decided I couldn't keep that up that facade anymore. And I wanted to do it before I started my career, before I established a professional identity. And so my last semester in law school, I transitioned. That was not a pleasant experience. You can hear more about that if you go to Bailiff's YouTube page. They have a series of It Gets Better videos in which I go over as part of those experiences. I don't want to go through the horror stories of what it was like to transition in Louisiana at Louisiana State University in 1989. It was not fun. And I tried to take the bar exam in Louisiana. I was denied because they said I wasn't of sound mind because I was trans. I had to appeal that to the state Supreme Court, did it myself. My first victory before I took the bar, my first appellate victory before I became an attorney was to be able to take the bar exam. And which really kind of sucked because I didn't want to use that as my writing sample, the brief that I did for why I should be allowed to take the bar. It was very, very hard because people knew, because when people found out about me, they no longer wanted to talk to me. And it was very hard for me to get a job as an attorney. I took the patent bar exam and passed it. I could not get a job because I had a master's in biomedical engineering and nobody knew what that was. So I went and, while I was waiting for my ex to graduate from law school, got a master's in electrical engineering to make myself more marketable as a patent attorney, which I was. And then I got a job afterwards, moved to the Bay Area, got a job as a patent attorney and did that for a while. It's been an interesting struggle because not everybody's open and accepting, and certainly weren't back in the 1990s when I was starting out my legal career. And as a result, I decided to go into the public sector where I felt like I could get a better opportunity to be, where I would have, my opportunities would be based more on merit than on things like worrying about whether or not the clients would be upset that they had a trans attorney. I find that attorneys in general often project their own fears and insecurities onto their clients, and they never admit, I have a problem with you. It's that it's the clients will have a problem with you. But and so I instead focused on going into the public sector. I did continue to go back and forth between the corporate world and in the government sector. Became a senior energy regulatory attorney for the state, then became an administrative law judge. And I decided I would run for an open seat because there was an incumbent that was not running for re-election for a seat here in our county. I ran and lost, then I ran 2 years later for another seat and won. And while I was at the Public Utilities Commission, this is something that makes Jessica excited, is the fact that I was the lead CEQA judge on transmission renewable energy siting projects for the state of California. So I was responsible for proceedings involving multi-billion-dollar construction projects through that would go through multiple counties for transmission lines for the utilities. And I was, in my period, 10 years on the bench here in Alameda County, I've been, at one point I was the backup CEQA judge, CEQA being the California Environmental Quality Act, which is the California equivalent of NEPA, which is the National Environmental Protection Act. And so I've done a lot of those sort of things. Now, as the judge, I have gone between doing criminal assignments as well as doing civil assignments, and I've done civil trials. I've done everything from from limited cases up to I've done several asbestos jury trials. Although on the tort cases, I've seemed to get a lot of them. I have had a couple of them that involve construction-related issues, but I would not call myself a construction judge. But nevertheless, I'm really glad and excited to be speaking with you today. And I think that Jessica probably has a lot of things she wants us to talk about before we're over. Unless there's anything else you want me to talk about my path.
No, I think you did a great job of covering that. And it is such a powerful story because there was an option for you that you could have continued on in job seeking and in building your legal career, presenting as a man, and avoided many challenges that you ended up facing from an outward perspective. But what's so powerful to me in hearing your story is understanding that for you to be authentic to who you knew you were, you
Right.
had to engage in that more challenging path. And that, I think that speaks volumes to your strength and tenacity as a person. And then also, as we'll talk about later, the model you've been able to serve for others who have similar struggles.
What I wanted to just say, what I want to say about that though too, is that I want to explain for people that one of the reasons I felt compelled to have to do that was that the gender presentation, the way that we look into the world, you know, if you dress like a guy, you know, if I was trying, I looked to all the world like I was a guy. And I felt like I was lying to people every time I walked in the room, because what I was presenting to them was, I'm a guy. And that wasn't who I really was. And it felt miserable. It's really interesting that despite all the problems I had my last semester in law school, with being ostracized and things like that, I still have my best grades in law school. And I took the patent bar at that same time and passed, and took the Louisiana bar and passed the first time, both of which had less than 50% pass rates. By the way, I passed the California bar the first time too. But you know, I spent so much of my time and energy stressing over trying to hide who I was, that it was distracting. And so instead now I could be myself, and although it was scary, I felt better about being myself, and I didn't have that same internal conflict, and didn't put energy into that sort of thing about, you know, trying to keep up a facade. Anyway, so want to move on to the next part?
Yes. So it would be great now to talk about the various ways in which we can serve as better partners in inclusivity, serving as allies if you identify as an ally, and appreciating that even if you aren't a member of a certain group, in many ways that means you're in the best position to assist folks who are in a different group than you are. And so talking about some of the various ways that we can be the people that I think many of us want to be, which is to be supportive and inclusive, and allowing people to be who they are and comfortable, and allow that open space. And so to kick that off, I think, you know, we've had a number of discussions about this. And one of the things I think that's so powerful that you've mentioned before is leading with intention, and the power that just that very basic concept can inform all of your interactions. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, actually, you know, in a lot of ways, that really does come down to the golden rule. I mean, it's treating others how we want to be treated ourselves. If you approach other people with respect, and I think that helps immensely. A lot of people are worried when they're trying to figure out how to interact with people who are different than themselves, that they're gonna screw something up, or they'll commit some faux pas, and they're nervous, they're embarrassed. But the truth of the matter is that people usually respond to the way that you're approaching it. You can say all the right things with a wrong attitude, and people will dislike you. And you can say all the wrong things, well, you prefer not to, but you know, if you're clearly trying, and I think that helps. So, for example, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, one thing that I as a judge, I have often very, very busy calendars. I've had to deal, you know, I'll have 100 people on in a morning or something in some of my assignments I've been in. And, you know, I have to, you know, talk to people of every race, ethnicity, gender identity, and such that you can imagine. We have them here in our county. We have, I mean, I think that people in our county speak something like, you know, 80 or 90 different languages, where we have people from all over the world. And so I sometimes will look, and I've had absolutely unpronounceable names of people. And so sometimes I just have to say, I'm sorry, I apologize, but I don't, how do you pronounce your name? Or how do you say that? or how should I address you? And for the most part, they're fine. The key thing is, and this is where I can sometimes fall a little short, which is that if I'm trying to remember between two ways of pronouncing something, somebody will say it the right way, and I have to write it down because otherwise I'll just say the wrong one again, because I'm always like, wait, now I know, but I still don't know. Was it this? Was that the wrong way? And so second guessing myself, I'll take notes. But it's you have to. And you also have to watch for the other person. You watch for body language, things like that. If you say something and you notice the other person winces, or you can see in their body language, the way they tighten up or something like that, that you may have said something a little bit awkward, try to be okay about it, and this is something we're going to talk about later, but if you make a mistake, you can just apologize, you move on. You don't want to draw attention to things, especially when you're dealing with trans people. I think you really don't want to you don't want to spend a lot of time focusing on this one aspect of a person, especially if that aspect isn't important. But what really matters is how you are being interacting with other people. And so, and you have to do that in a way that's sincere and it's you. You can't, you have to be yourself. At least that's always been my approach to things. Not everybody likes the fact that I'm always myself, but I'm very me. I am the same person on the bench that I am off the bench. I'm the same person for the most part in public and in private. I don't put on the personas because that can be a little bit awkward. And some people have, I think, a problem with that because I am, well, not necessarily the type of person that most people identify as being a judge, but I started this whole journey saying I'd be honest with being myself, and that's who I've tried to be the whole time. And so, but don't try to be something you're not, and just be yourself. Now, let's go on and talk for a minute about pronouns. And you might be able to say something about that because you've done something yourself right here today.
Are you talking to me?
Yes, you.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry,
I didn't know if you meant the collective you.
No,
yes.
Jessica, what can we do in terms of pronouns? Well, one thing is, first of all, different people have different pronouns. And this is one of the most difficult and awkward things that we have. This is something that the judges ask me for advice about all the time, and it's really hard. One of the things that the problem is that we speak a language, and our language is gendered. Not as much as some other languages are, but still it is. We have pronouns that are different for people for things that are female and for male and for neutral. And this is one of the problems actually that people encounter with dealing with talking with non-binary people, because we have been taught that using neutral terms means you're treating somebody like an object. And so I think that makes people uncomfortable. So because it sort of becomes he, she, it. And it's like, no, they're not an it. And so how do we address people if they're not a he or a she? And the answer is we say they. And some people, they automatically clam up. I've had this discussion with so many judges. They're like, I just can't do it. Grammatically, I cannot do it. It just does not work for me. And the answer, though, to that one is that we use the word they in a singular form all the time. And we have been using it like that for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to, I'm now, come on. come on. Anyway. Here's a link to a Wikipedia article on the singular use of the word they. It's a thing. People have been doing it for a long time. You just don't realize it because it's unusual. It's uncommon, but people have been using it, the term they, for to refer to a single other person who, without identifying their gender, for apparently back to the 14th century. And so it's not a new thing. It's just something that we're just adopting a lot now. And so you will encounter a lot of people who will tell you, they'll probably tell you they prefer to be called they or them. One way you can indicate to people, though, that you're open and understanding of the fact that they may have pronouns different than you is, Jessica?
Yes, so various ways in which you can create space so that it's allowed for everyone is in your name on a Zoom, add your pronouns. In the signature block of your emails, add your pronouns. In a group setting, having it be commonplace to say, hi, my name is Jessica, she, her pronouns. And in the LGBT community, this has become much more commonplace. And so what you'll find is the more and more you do it, then the more and more natural it becomes. And what that does, and Judge Kolakowski, I'm sure will speak to this from what I understand, is that it then allows you to know what the other person's pronouns are and what they would prefer. And it also makes it less unusual or that it stands out less for someone to then provide their pronouns. It's just a part of how we interact with each other so that we know how to be authentic and respectful of how people identify.
It's a way of signaling to people that you are sensitive to the issue and that you want to be doing things the right way for them. Now, of course, it's also probably a signal to a lot of people that you're from a major liberal or urban area like San Francisco or New York, but nevertheless, it's one way that we can do it, and it's become very prevalent, certainly in the environment that where we are in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I just wanted to throw that out because one of my colleagues, who's a cisgender gay man, he's made this like almost, as a judge, it's made it almost a crusade for him to try to get people to use pronouns this way. He's down in Los Angeles. And so I just wanted to throw that out as one thing that I think that there's a simple thing that people can do. And it also so you understand when people are doing that, why they're doing it. Because
if I could jump in on one point there too, is I think that in some LGBT organizations, for example, it's pretty standard practice to have on the name tag the pronoun designation. And so for the forum, for example, considering ways in which we may be able to implement that because it is an inclusive way to open up that space. And I've found that to be very helpful at LGBT organization events to provide that. And so, sorry, what were you going to say, Judge?
No, that's perfectly fine. I was just thinking about whether I was going to move on to another topic.
Well, I think that there were some other things that you had spoken to that I think are really interesting to unpack. And so you talked about being true to who you are in an interaction. Mm-hmm. And so if you are interacting with someone who you know to identify as trans or non-binary or in various different kinds of gender expression, ways that you can act as an ally. If you're not a funny person, trying to be a funny person is probably not going to land well. And so being who you are, consistent with that is going to serve you the best way. And so if you're a very earnest, sincere person, continue to be your earnest and sincere person. If you're a funny person, be funny, although maybe, practice some of that humor out before you try it. But just to emphasize that you don't have to be someone that you're not when you're trying to support other folks who identify differently from you. Find ways to be supportive within the scope of who you are. I thought that was a really valuable point.
I will say that with regard to sense of humor, I try to be at least partly self-deprecating in all of my humor. If I ever say something that's meant to be funny, it's usually pointing out the absurdity of things, usually of myself, or that I'm part of it. And I sometimes use, actually as a judge, use humor as a way to try to cut the tension. For example, when I start doing trials, I usually open up with something that will lighten up the mood. Of course, the problem is that I've had some juries that just are like cut it up when they're deliberating. But you know, I try to keep things not so tense all the time. But that's just that it works for me. It doesn't necessarily work for other people.
Right.
And humor is a very dangerous thing to do, especially when you're dealing with something that people are sensitive about. And so pointing out that you're making jokes about how you're an idiot sometimes are better than making jokes about the other person's being foolish.
Agreed.
And so one of the things about, I mean, you can try using gender neutral pronouns, and that's nice, although it's really hard because one of the things, because the fact our language is so gendered. So if I was in court and Jessica were appearing in front of me, I could either say Ms. Bogo or I would say counsel. So it's one of the reasons I say counsel a lot. It's also really good because sometimes I don't remember people's names. But if I do that, I'm doing that. But the problem then becomes, you know, which counsel am I talking about? And so it'd be like, defense counsel, would you tell me more about such and such? Because I don't want, but the problem it becomes then too, when I've done things in the criminal world and people don't want you saying defendant, what do you say? You know, and so how do you deal with a person who's been charged with something? Well, you want to use something, some polite statement like Ms. Garcia, or, you know, Mr. Chan. And, you know, you look at it and it's like, but somebody's sitting in front of you and you're like, that means you have to gender them. This is a really complicated thing. And it's not easy. I'm not gonna try to make it sound like you're gonna be able to get out of, an hour with us an answer. But it's something to be sensitive to. I just wanted to touch on that. I do have oh, and one thing I do want I do want to say with regard to this before I had a question sent to me and I'm gonna try to address it. But one of the things that I want to talk about is you see, for example, right now you've got a transgender person who's here and willing to answer your questions. That's something that you may not have like ever. And so you may be really curious. And this is a problem that I try to talk to judges about a lot because they are often curious. And there are certain things that are not appropriate to ask. And people ask the most crazy, stupid things. If you want to see some examples of that, if you have Netflix, watch the documentary Disclosure, which is about the representation of transgender people in media. And, you know, and the people would go on talk shows and, you know, the host would ask about their genitalia and, you know, it's like about their surgical status and things like that. It's like, these are things that you would never ask anybody else. I mean, I would not want, you know, interacting with people, ask them about, well, any of that stuff. I mean, it's a judge, I'm even feeling nervous saying that word, you know, on video. You know, saying genitalia, but I mean, talking about people's private parts, you know, you don't go up to somebody stranger and say, you know, somebody and ask them about their genitals. I mean, you don't ask them about some of these things. And so it's somewhat rude, but people are fascinated, especially if they don't know a lot. And so what I tell judges is what I call my little tweet rule, which is that if you can't explain the reason for a question, the way that a question that you're about to ask relates to the subject matter of whatever's in front of you in the space of a tweet, don't answer it. Don't ask it. I mean, if you have to go through a laborious explanation for why you need to know, you really probably just don't know. You're just curious. That's not appropriate. This person who's in front of you is not there to answer these questions. That's what Google's for. If you have curiosity about any of these things, there's an immense amount of information available out there. Don't go asking strangers, to try to educate you about something that, is very sensitive. Because for the most part, especially for those of us who are trans, we don't like to think about the fact that we're trans. This is not something, I didn't say, wow, I wish I were trans. I would love to be, trans. I would love to be the first trans judge. Oh, by the way, the way that whole discussion was, I was elected in 2010 to be a judge in Alameda County in California. In the week after I was elected, but before I was sworn in, the mayor of Houston swore in a part-time municipal court judge in Houston, Phyllis Fry, who's been a major leader in the trans legal community for decades, and she became the first openly transgender judge. And so that's why we keep looking for qualifiers. Now, some of my friends in bailiff, in the Bay Area, refuse to acknowledge Phyllis's, primacy on this. But I just always have to look for some different explanation for why it is. But it's and so I just wanted to share that I was asked an interesting question. I do want to get to that, and then we're going to go into our final discussion about what people can do. But what's really important, I think, and well, actually, I'll save this for then. I just want to get to this other issue because it touches on something. When I transitioned, for example, when I transitioned in law school, it was a very, very awkward situation. The school did not want me using the men's room. They didn't want me using the women's room. So they gave me keys to the chancellor's private bathroom. And so I had a bathroom I was allowed to use, one on campus. And otherwise I was prohibited from using the restrooms. The access to facilities is a really controversial issue. And it's a controversial issue in a lot of places. And it's something that's been a bit of a problem for me personally, because I'm in a profession as a judge. I'm supposed to be neutral. I'm supposed to be apolitical. I'm not, here trying to promote a political agenda. There are states where if I go to the bathroom, I am making a political statement. And this is a very, very awkward place for me to be in, because I mean, it's like, don't be political. Well, my existence is political. My being transgender and a judge is a political statement in some ways that my community made about the fact that they were willing to put it aside and to accept me as me. And so but this remains, I know, a very challenging issue for many people in many places. And it's a problem on workplaces. It's a major problem in workplace environments. And coming up with gender neutral facilities, things like that. It's the law in California that all single stall bathrooms are supposed to be gender neutral, although even our courts have not completely complied with that, which is something that I keep pushing them on, and everybody's like, oh, we'll get to it. But in some places, this is a very controversial thing. And this is going to be the course of the subject of a lot of litigation, so I can't talk about a lot of it. But this is one of those issues that the use of separate facilities is a touch point. I mean, it's a flashpoint. It's something that just came up this week with the president issuing an executive order and people on Twitter responding hostilely towards making various accommodations based upon people's self-identification. And so I can't give you answers, but I can tell you that that's going to continue, I think, to be a big issue until we as a society resolve things, which could take a long time. Because after all, we've already gotten racism and sexism taken care of, and so dealing with transgender stuff should be a piece of cake, right? No, that's not
Right,
the case.
right. We've worked through all of our issues.
What I want to say, though, and leading up to our final topic, is it's really important for allies to stand up for us. And you see, if somebody says something in a group and I say something about it, I'm being touchy. I'm having thin skin. However, if I'm in the room and Jessica were to hear something, what would you do?
Right. And so this is an opportunity where if we don't identify as a certain group, we can actually serve as a very powerful force in helping affect change. And whether it has to do with prioritizing the greater inclusivity with respect to bathrooms, or even in a conversation, say that someone in a group were to say something that isn't necessarily as sensitive as you think it could have been. If you're not a member of the group, then stepping up and saying, whoa, where are you going with that? Or again, consistent with who you are as a person. You can treat it as something, a very earnest response or a humorous response, but some way to step up and speak up on behalf of groups that are not your own can be a very powerful force. And so what you were talking about earlier, Judge Kolakowski.
People will, and sometimes people just make really rude, offensive jokes and comments. For example, and that's something you do as a white person. If somebody says something that's racially insensitive, step up and say, we don't talk that way, because otherwise what it becomes like a sort of a locker room kind of thing where we all laugh to get along, and we just get a thick skin and let people make fun of you. And that's not a very positive, it's a very hurtful thing. I do want to add one thing before we move on to our final topic here, which is that for example, talking about offensive comments, I had a friend who was who's a criminal attorney who is transgender, who told me that, who had posted something actually on social media about how somebody had made an offensive joke in their presence, and in my county, if somebody in a courtroom, and I sent her a private message and I said, tell me where that was. We need to deal with it. Whose courtroom was it? And she got really sheepish. She said, it was yours. Somebody, you weren't on the bench, and one of the attorneys made a really transphobic joke. And I went and talked to that person's supervisor, and they said, that's just him. He's an idiot, and he just does things like that. He thinks he's funny. And so, if it happened in my courtroom, it can happen anywhere. And so it's something to be sensitive about. And
really quickly, just to jump on that, one thing, if you do mess up, or if you've realized that or someone lets you know that you've done something that may not have been as sensitive as you'd like, there are various ways to handle that. And I think even an apology is a bit controversial, because I found it very helpful for folks to point out to me that sometimes when you mess up and you apologize, you're making then the apology about you, and requiring then the person who was offended to do the emotional labor of forgiving you for all of your sins. And so you certainly don't want to put on another person then the burden of then going through all of those motions. And so various ways that you can do that instead of falling all over yourself about, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Oh my, can you ever find yourself in your heart to forgive me? Just say, yikes, that wasn't great. Sorry about that. And acknowledge it and move on, or say, or acknowledge it in some other way, or thank someone if someone points out that it wasn't great. Thank you for letting me know that. I really appreciate it. I am going to really work hard to factor that in the future. Various ways to just acknowledge that it's not the way you would have wanted it to be, and that you're open to the feedback without making it all about you. I thought that was really a helpful pointer.
Okay, and now we're almost out of time, and so I want us to go to end with something that I think is really important. It's always interesting to me when I go to the swearing-in ceremonies of my colleagues and things like that, and other people. I hear them talk about their mentors and about how they had other people who were like them, who helped them move up. Well, I never had any of that because I'm the first, and so as a result of that, I have felt a real need to be a mentor for other people and to help them along. But the truth of the matter is that the people who helped me along my path in my career were, for the most part, cisgender, straight, white men. People that, I do not dislike cisgender, straight, white men. Some people think that, diversity means bashing white guys, and it's not. The people who are in the best position to be able to help other people come up through the ranks are people in authority who are part of whatever majority group there is. As I said earlier, they can be powerful people to speak on your behalf and to cut down negative comments. It's also the opportunity to mentor other people and bring them up. Now people tend to like to mentor people who are like themselves. And this is normal human behavior. But what I would ask and what I would challenge people to do who are listening as we wrap this up is to look for people who aren't like you, but who you see some value to. You may see some characteristics about them that are like you, even if they don't look like you. You may have had some similar things in your backgrounds, maybe all sorts of things. The truth of the matter is that most of us are more alike than we are different. And those differences are important and they should be respected and they should be honored. But the truth is that we're all people. We're all on this call, we're all lawyers. We do the same work. We follow the same rules. I think that we all have good hearts. We want the same things out of life. And so I would just encourage you, when you find somebody who seems a little lost because there's no one like them that they can look to, take them under your wing. Don't say, don't make a big thing out of it like you're being like it's a charity case or like, you're being magnanimous, but just, make sure that they feel included, make sure that they get assignments, make sure that they get invited to things, that they don't get left out. And in that way, you can be an ally, the person who's responsible for the next great person to come along, because somebody needs to be there to help the next generation along. And you can do that for people, even if they don't look like you, sound like you, love like you, or anything else. And this is, because we're all in this together. And that's how I wanted to wrap up today. And so with that,
thank you so much. Yes, and we'll turn it over to Christine for our concluding remarks.
Wow. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Judge Kolakowski. Thank you, Jessica, for your good interview. And I just have to say, I am just so proud at this moment of your presentation, of the forum, that we are supporting this environment, this dialogue, and working toward creating cultures of inclusion in construction, design, and law. This is the point, as the judge just said, which is so true. There's so much more about us that is similar, that is different. Can we find a way to respect one another in our differences and get along? That message has such a huge global impact, or could, here in the United States on so many levels, and especially in the way that we practice and the way we carry ourselves as professionals. So thank you from the heart for your transparency and your courage, Judge, all your life. When you shared your story about law school, I just thought, I gasped. I thought, oh my gosh, your courage. That was remarkable. So from my heart to yours, I thank you. And Jessica, thank you for bringing the judge to us. Okay, everyone. So now I want to thank this team for this month's presentation. It was awesome. And now I'm going to try to share my screen with you and show you what's coming up next month. Here we go. Next month, be sure to join us on Thursday, February 18 at 1 o'clock Eastern, when our guest speaker will be Angela Vallot, who is a nationally recognized consultant on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Vallot Carp. Forum leader Kelly Bundy will discuss with Ms. Vallot the architecture of inclusion. He's designing and building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. And they'll discuss best practices for law firms seeking to create more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments that will affect lasting cultural change. You know, it happens one person, one relationship at a time. It is possible. So that is all from us here at the Forum on Construction Law. We thank you so much for attending today, and we look forward to you joining us next month. Thank you all. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Oh, it's been an honor here too.
Same.